And give me just 1 second to check that we are successfully going live. Hello. Yes, okay. Success, check. Hello, welcome everybody. Today, Andrew Lamb is joining me, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about the Apache community and getting started with the Apache Arrow community. So yeah, I'll give the floor to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Anais. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I've never done one of these, so please feel free to ask questions along the way. And I'm just going to sort of give a brief introduction to like what Apache Arrow is and the community around it, not necessarily the technology. We've talked about that a lot, and then how you can begin contributing. So in order to understand, like, so there's the name Apache, and then there's Arrow. Just taking one step back, the way Apache is organized is it's governed by the Apache Software Foundation. So now what does that mean, right? So anyone can make an open source project. And I think one of the questions that always comes up when you have an open source project, anyone can take the code and do whatever they want with it, but the community sort of is very powerful, and getting everyone to work together sort of with this shared understanding of how things are supposed to work. I think that sometimes that takes a lot of effort to build that community, build the shared understanding, and get everyone sort of agreed on how things should go, like who should be able to commit, who says, how do you resolve design decision questions or differences of opinion. And so different open source projects approach this differently, but the way the Arrow project started is they decided to become part of the Apache Software Foundation. So the Apache Software Foundation is a foundation that was originally set up for the Apache web server, right, which is like the granddaddy of open source web servers, runs a significant chunk of the internet. And they basically, the community that wrote that web server software went through this process of figuring out how to communicate and how to govern their projects and whatever. And what they did was then they started inviting other projects into the same umbrella. So basically, you can join the Apache project, and there's a process that describes it. And this is an umbrella organization that sort of sets a level set of rules about, the rules, but guidelines and just sort of the way you manage your project. And so Arrow is part of that Apache foundation. And so there's definitely benefits to doing that. For example, the rules of how the project is governed is very clear, right? And there's lots of documentation about that on the Apache website. And I think the expectations around communication and visibility are excellent, which I'll talk about a little bit in a second. There are some downsides, like it definitely comes with a process, and like there's a, I hate use the word bureaucracy, but that's effectively what it is, where there's a process to do things, and that's put in place so that it's not as susceptible to one bad actor or company capture. Like another thing that Apache project tries to do is provide a project that's not solely bound to the life cycle of a particular company, even if a company is contributing significantly to it. So that kind of gives you a sense, right? There's Apache Arrow Foundation, and then there's a common set of rules and practices or whatever, and then there's individual projects. So Arrow is one of those individual projects. Within the project, it's entirely self-governed by a group of people called the PMC, which I believe stands for Program Management Committee. But it's people who have contributed to the project over time, and they primarily serve a bureaucratic function to help report up and make sure that the project is being run in the way that Apache says. So let's see. But one of the other real benefits of the Apache Software Foundation, at least from a company perspective, like InfluxDB, is that the rules are clear, right? It's clear who's this, and it doesn't like prevent bad things from happening necessarily all the time, but I think at least it's like the expectations are clear, and it also allows typically larger companies will often have sort of had experience with the Apache Software Foundation, understand how it works, understand there's no like intellectual property or legal restraints, right? Like it has all the stuff built in there, and so like especially in Arrow, we find people who work at big companies often tell us that the only reason they're able to contribute to the project is because it's governed by Apache, right? And if it had some other governance structure, like they basically have to go through a separate process at their job, which either would be hard or impossible to get permission to contribute to as part of their work environment. So I think, on the whole, Apache is a great organizational structure. So
could you expand upon some of the governance that is required and like what about it is so effective?
yes, so thank you, Anais. That's an excellent question. So there's a thing called the Apache Way, which is the Apache Foundation's attempt to try to distill down its ideals into like a summary, basically. And I'll just go through these briefly, but this is like the high level, both goals and how it's achieved for the process. So earned authority means that we go out of their way not to like invite companies to contribute, right? So it's not, you don't necessarily get committer access to a project. In fact, you do not get committer access to a project based off the company you work for. It's based off the contributions you made to the project. Right? So that's a goal to try to avoid overly relying on any particular company. Likewise, the community of peers is very important. It's again, it's trying to be like there's no company or outside organization that's controlling the way the project is run. It's really the people who are contributing to the project drive it forward. And there's several places in there where there, you know, sometimes there's there's certain things which have hierarchies, but they're tried to be kept to the bare minimum. So for example, there is, you know, a list of people who can commit stuff to the project, and a list of people, you know, and then other people who can't. But that's about the only difference between committers and non-committers. The expectation is everyone's expected to contribute to design discussions, and everyone's expected to review code and to provide pull requests and to do bug reports and stuff. So, you know, I think it would be unfair to say there is no because the contribution level also like the more you contribute, typically is the way you sort of progress up this relatively flat hierarchy. So basically, the biggest contributors often will be the ones at the top of the hierarchy. But the goal is really that the contributions is what defines your ability to influence the project, not something about your particular role. Open communications is another massive one that took me a while to get used to, especially because I came from the enterprise software world where, you know, you don't just broadcast to the open every single thing. So I think the expectation in Apache projects, and Arrow is a good example of it, is that basically almost everything is done in the open. In fact, and by open it means anyone on the internet can both read the contents and also contribute to it. It actually works So the only exception to this rule is basically stuff related to membership decisions and personnel decisions about who should get committer access. That's the only thing that's on. There's like a private mailing list, but any technical discussions or any product direction questions or anything else, like that all happens on public mailing lists and, you know, GitHub issues and stuff. So the expectation is that you don't like have a Slack conversation or a, you know, Discord conversation with a few other contributors and then drive the conversation forward that way. The expectation is anything that is going to affect the community is done in the open. And I think, you know, that's an important point in that we do that a lot. And sometimes it's weird, right? Because you have to post stuff to the Apache mailing list and whatever. But it's very important to have that visibility into the communication. And then also Apache provides like the archiving. So you can always go back and look at prior conversations. They don't just like disappear.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. That's nice.
Yeah. So, you know, especially in this day and age, like I'll probably date myself, like they don't seem fine to me, right, with email, but many people these days try to, you know, are more comfortable or use other forms of communication like Slack in particular, or not in Slack, that's also dating myself, like Discord or whatever the hot new chat apps are. And I think one of the challenges is to make sure that any communication that happens there remains open, right? And like Discord's not an open forum in the sense that it's a company, right? And if they went out of business, there's no guarantee that the history of your conversations will be there. So I think there's been some tension over time, but the goal is always to keep open communication. Likewise, consensus decision making. It's, you know, there's other decision making models that have worked well in other open source projects, like Benign Dictator for Life is a good example of the Python ecosystem, which works great. I mean, it worked great for them. It clearly is a super successful project. But I think that's not the Apache. And so a benign dictator is like there's one person who sort of is directing the overall direction of the project. in Apache, it's for better or for worse. It's basically stuff should be driven by consensus, and typically it means unanimous consensus, or at least no one objects. I think we try real hard to avoid um, problematic consensus, but realistically, I think most decisions we find some way to get everyone on board. And let's see, I guess I don't know what this responsible oversight is. Yeah, trust and delegated oversight. This just means it's not, while there is a process here, it's not overly heavy-handed. And I think it's, having gone through many processes in large companies, I would say the ASF governance model is pretty light comparatively. You might not like it compared to like a open source project that you did with a couple of your friends. It's definitely much more there's a lot more overhead than that, but on the whole, I think it's pretty well done. I think the other major things that the Apache project and Arrow specifically think are very important is maintaining independence. So just, it's probably hard to hear this, right, when there's actually there's quite a history of companies effectively capturing the committers for most of a project, and then the project basically slows down or goes towards what the company wants. Apache tries to avoid doing that by having, through a variety of its processes. So that's a goal. Realistically, if I was honest, it probably doesn't always happen, but the goal is that the project is vendor neutral. And I think we've had very good luck with that in Arrow and Data Fusion, right? Like, obviously I work for Influx Data and I contribute a lot to Arrow and Data Fusion, but there's also a huge number of other people who do as well. And I think on some of the projects that just like sort of Influx Data manages and maintains, there's not the same level of contribution from other other people. Like, yes, there's contributions, but it's important to make sure that people feel that it's not just a project run for the benefit of one vendor. And then the final thing is community over code. I don't know how many of you have been coders or run into people who sort of insist on that the code has to be a certain way, or that if it's not beautiful, it's not right, or whatever. I think the philosophy of Apache and this consequently of Arrow in general, and I mean, it worked great for me in the past too, is that it's much more important to make sure you have a healthy community where people feel like they can contribute and actively improve things, and that their voices are heard, is much more important than having sort of like the most beautiful code you can imagine. And the rationale, frankly, is just that whatever the code looks like, you can always fix it. I realize there's subtleties, on how much you can fix and how much effort it takes, but I think, like it says here, like strong communities have much better chance of rectifying problems with their code than you're going to be able to rectify a problem with your community, even if you have beautiful code, because you'll just struggle to attract other people who will want to help. And I think that has served us well as well. So does that make, hopefully that's an interesting introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Cool. And so maybe I'll just talk a little bit about, you can see some of those principles that I talk about in action if you go to this Arrow site, right? This is the main arrow.apache.org site. You can see, here, it gives you all the links where you can go look at the mailing list archives. It's kind of annoying to go find stuff in here, but this is how people refer it. Oops, not this one. They refer to the back history, right? So you want to know something about what's going on in Arrow development today, you can go check this mailing list out, or for general discussions, or you can go look at the GitHub issues. So in particular, we'll talk about governance in a second too. So in this case, it's all the Arrow project is run both from a repo that has a lot of the implementations, like the C++ and the Python are in this Arrow repository, but there's several other repositories as well that are governed by the same thing. So like Arrow RS, for example, is the Rust implementation. This is what Influx Data contributes a lot to. There's also Arrow Data Fusion, which is the query engine that we talk a lot about as well. It's also sort of governed by the same system, even though it's in a separate repository. And I think it's a credit to the Apache system that it's perfectly capable of, supporting different structures for the things that different communities felt would be best for them. And there's issues, and you can see there's lots of stuff going on.
Nice. Yeah, that flexibility is so important.
Yeah. Also, something that should be clear is that all this code is Apache license, right? There's no different licenses or anything. Like basically all Apache code is Apache license. This is like the granddaddy of all open source licenses, and that it's basically super permissive and gives you basically you can do anything you want with the code except use the Apache name. Basically, is what it comes with. And of course, you don't get a warranty and you don't get liability or anything. But this I think is generally acknowledged as one of the most permissive licenses out there, and I think again is one of the reasons why so many people feel comfortable contributing to these projects, because they know that it's very well understood license that's been around for close to 20 years. If you want to see the list of people who are on the Apache Arrow governance committee, you can go. That's on the website. There's also ways to look at it on the Apache Arrow, the Apache site. But here, I think one of the reasons to show you this list is that the project management committee are, we're all basically contributors in some way or another. The only difference here is this is the group that can vote on software releases, official releases, and membership changes. That's basically the main thing that the PMC does. We also write a report. Well, I coordinate writing a report to the Apache Foundation every 3 months, but mostly that's a community effort as well. And we do that all in the open. So, the reason I'm showing you this list is I think it's pretty cool if you look at the number of different organizations that people belong to. There's definitely some that show up multiple times, but there's also a lot of them that, it's just a wide variety of both big and small companies, which I think gives that much more credit to the notion that we've attracted a large, diverse community. And these are people who have done enough to the project that they were voted to be included in the management decisions. And then there's an even longer list of people who are committers who can commit changes to the repository, and that is again a nice big list.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I like that it's so easily accessible too.
Yeah, we went through, it was a common question of how do you become a committer, right? I said that's the one thing that's not public is the discussions about how to become a committer. So we wrote up recently how to become a committer. And it's very important if you read this, you don't have to read this now, but basically the story for becoming a committer is you just contribute a bunch, right? And you pretty much, you do everything. Committers and non-committers do basically exactly the same things is the expectation. The only difference is committers can actually click the merge button. And obviously that's not, there's probably some nuance there, and committers probably invest a little more time than non-committers, but that's the expectation, and I think that's what this is trying to say. And then PMC is basically the same way. It's you're basically doing the work to help grow the community and encourage other people, right? And that's, when you're doing the job, then it gets recognized officially, is basically the goal.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, so I think that's that.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. With that, let's wait maybe if you're okay with waiting a minute or so to see if any questions stream in, unless there's anything else that you wanted to add.
No, I think that's good. I can talk about anything anyone wants to hear about, but I think that's a good overview.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you coming on our office hours today.
No problem.
Yeah, so if anyone has a question, now's the time. Otherwise, if you come up with one later, feel free to ask in Slack or on the forums, and we're happy to answer there. But it's looking pretty silent, so I will say that I think we're good. Thank you so much for everyone that attended.
Yeah, and everyone who doesn't love a good bureaucracy discussion about how programs are run?
It's super fascinating though, because I imagine it feels really cool too to be actively contributing with people from other companies towards the same goal, and feeling like you not only have, your community within your own company, but really do feeling that, cross-organization collaboration. And that actually
it works so well. Yeah, my background, I don't know what it is. It's like 18 years in enterprise software, right? So I understand how the enterprise software and like how organizations work and how like I have a lot of software development experience, even with big teams, right? But it's all been inside a company. And one of the things that's been wonderful about Influx data is being able to work on these open source projects. And it's kind of interesting to see like there's open source in the sense that like the source is out there and people can look at it, maybe they can do what they want with it, but realistically, like the only people contributing are people from the sponsoring organization, right? Or there's some small tail off of like I would say that's open source, but not necessarily open contribution.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, I think the main InfluxDB IOX repo, while it's all open source, is actually quite a bit harder to contribute to for a variety of reasons that I won't expound here than Arrow and Data Fusion for people outside the team. Whereas Arrow and Data Fusion, like you can just see it by the numbers. There's contributors from all over, right? And some stuff is directly related to helps in IOX, and some stuff is like basically irrelevant to IOX, and some stuff is who knows. I think it's just really cool to see it all come together and sort of like it's pretty impressive the amount of technology that's in Arrow and Data Fusion in the sense that like prior to this kind of open source project, to be able to fund the development of something that sophisticated would have required tens of millions of VC dollars in funding probably. So it was really cool to see.
Yeah, it's also really cool to read some of the issues and like hear people discuss design decisions, and have that be all publicly available. And I've learned a lot through, kind of creeping around and reading some. So it's even cool from that perspective too.
Yeah, if anything, I'd encourage anyone to chime in, because sometimes you write these and like there's a few people who might respond, but like you don't really, I never really know who's watching, right? And like sometimes people will show up. Like I tell people I'm still shocked where if I write up a ticket of like, hey, it would be nice if Data Fusion did this thing or Arrow did this thing, and basically someone like I don't know who and I don't know who they are or why they wanted it, but like they'll show up in those, and oftentimes the code is really good, right? And it just does this thing, and it's like it still shocks me when that happens, but it happens all the time, and it's just amazing, and
That's awesome.
yeah, it doesn't, you might imagine it works better for sort of smaller, well-described contained features than it does for like bigger changes, but it's amazing to see it.
Yeah, that's cool. A reminder to always ask.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Andrew.
All right. Thanks again. Good rest of your day.
You too.